Germany built 354 Tiger tanks. Each one was a masterpiece, a towering machine of steel and precision feared across every battlefield it touched. But behind that fearsome reputation lies one of history's greatest strategic blunders. For the same cost and effort, Germany could have built nearly 4,000 Panzer IVs, reliable, simpler, and far easier to maintain. Instead, they chose to chase perfection. And in that decision, they doomed themselves. Here's the brutal arithmetic of war. A single Tiger tank cost 300,000 Reichsmarks and demanded 300,000 man-hours to build. A Panzer IV? Only 100,000 marks and a fraction of the labor, about 50,000 hours. Every time Germany built one Tiger, they gave up the chance to field 3 solid, battle-ready Panzer IVs by 1943. The Allies were flooding Europe and the Soviets were producing tens of thousands of T-34s. Germany didn't need another technological marvel. It needed numbers, mobility, and endurance. Instead, it built complexity. The Tiger was an engineering triumph. Thick armor, devastating 88mm cannon, and unmatched presence on the battlefield. But it was also a logistical nightmare disguised as brilliance. Its intricate systems, heavy armor, and massive size made it slow to build, slower to repair, and impossible to replace quickly. Each Tiger rolled out of the factory as a symbol of German industrial pride, and as a reminder of strategic blindness. The Reich poured manpower, material, and time into a single vehicle that could dominate duels, yet lose the war. While other nations built war machines that could be repaired on the field, transported easily and produced in the thousands, Germany was handcrafting its downfall, one expensive Tiger at a time. The most feared tank in history was, in truth, a victory for engineering and a disaster for strategy, because war, as Germany would soon learn, isn't won by brilliance on the drawing board. It's won by arithmetic on the battlefield, and the numbers were already against them. On paper, the Tiger tank was indestructible. In reality, it was fragile, not because of its armor, but because of its engineering. Every part of the Tiger demanded precision manufacturing, and that perfection came at a devastating price. The Tiger required 2,000 man-hours of maintenance for every 100 miles it drove. That's not in combat, that's just travel. Its transmission, one of the most complex ever designed, routinely failed after 150 miles. The final drive, responsible for moving its massive treads, often shattered after only 60 miles. For every Tiger that reached the battlefield, another sat broken in a repair yard, or worse, abandoned in a ditch. By 1944, more than half of all Tigers were lost not to enemy fire, but to mechanical failure or self-destruction. 57%, destroyed by the very complexity that was supposed to make them invincible. A Tiger mechanic from the 501st Heavy Battalion recalled, "We spent 10 hours maintaining for every hour fighting." That wasn't exaggeration, it was the grim daily routine of Tiger crews. The tank's components were so intricate that even trained mechanics struggled to keep them running. If a transmission failed in Russia, there was no fixing it in the field. The parts were too specialized, the tools too rare, so the crews blew them up to keep them from falling into Soviet hands. In the freezing mud of the Eastern Front, these massive machines became tombs of German engineering ambition. A Tiger stuck in snow or mud wasn't just immobile, it was a total loss. Its 57 tons of steel were impossible to tow, impossible to recover, and often left behind. The irony was painful. Germany had built a tank so advanced that it couldn't survive the very war it was made for. Its armor could shrug off shells, but not the realities of mud, distance, and cold. Meanwhile, the Soviet T-34s rolled endlessly forward. Simple, rugged, and easy to repair, they didn't need to be perfect, just available. Where one Tiger broke down, 10 T-34s rolled past. Each German mechanic fixing a Tiger was a soldier not fighting, a resource not advancing. And still, the propaganda machine celebrated the Tiger as a symbol of unstoppable power. Posters showed it crushing enemy armor. Articles praised its kill-to-loss ratio. But the truth on the ground was different. Commanders begged for spare parts, fuel, and functioning tanks. Instead, they got orders to hold positions at all costs. The Tigers couldn't move, couldn't fight, and often couldn't retreat. The hidden cost of perfection wasn't just in steel and oil. It was in time, manpower, and morale. Every Tiger demanded a small army of specialists to keep it alive, an army Germany could no longer afford. Each mile of operation drained the Reich's limited resources. Each breakdown eroded its fighting capability. The Tiger was a marvel to look at, but a nightmare to live with. It was the physical embodiment of Germany's obsession with superiority, built at the expense of sustainability. In chasing the perfect weapon, they created a machine that couldn't sustain itself. The Tiger wasn't destroyed by the enemy. It was undone by its own design, and that mechanical fragility, that hidden cost of perfection, was only the beginning of Germany's downfall, because next came a problem even the engineers couldn't solve: the Tiger's impossible weight and its thirst for fuel. The Tiger tank was a monster, 57 tons of steel, firepower and German pride. But that weight was its curse. For every mile it advanced, Germany's supply lines groaned under the strain. The Tiger didn't just fight the enemy, it fought physics itself. Europe's infrastructure wasn't built for giants. The Tiger was too heavy for 90% of European bridges. Its treads crushed rural roads, its engines tore themselves apart under stress. To move it by train required specialized flat cars, of which there were only a handful. Even loading one took hours, and every hour spent transporting a Tiger was an hour lost in battle. On the front lines, the situation was even worse. A Tiger consumed 5 gallons of fuel per mile on open roads. In combat conditions, that number soared to 1 gallon every quarter mile. Its operational range? Barely 60 miles, and then only under perfect circumstances. After that, it stopped, silent, stranded, waiting for fuel trucks that were already empty. By 1943, Germany was running out of everything: steel, rubber, oil. Romanian oil fields couldn't meet demand. Allied bombing crippled refineries. And yet, the Tiger demanded more fuel than 5 Panzerführers combined. While smaller tanks advanced, Tigers sat immobile, their crews watching the war pass them by. Fuel became as deadly as any enemy. Convoys carrying it were prime targets for Allied fighter bombers. Every destroyed truck meant more Tigers trapped in place, abandoned or destroyed by their own crews to prevent capture. A single Tiger company could drain the fuel reserves of an entire division. Commanders quickly learned that deploying them was a luxury, one they could rarely afford. Even when they reached the front, they often had to conserve fuel so strictly that they couldn't maneuver freely in combat. The Tiger, built to dominate, became a prisoner of its own consumption, and its weight caused more problems than fuel. Bridges collapsed under them. Rivers became impassable obstacles. Roads turned to mud under their treads. On the Eastern Front, Tigers frequently bogged down in soft terrain, unable to reverse or turn. Rescue vehicles couldn't tow them. Nothing was strong enough. Crews often had no choice but to destroy their own tank and flee on foot. German engineers tried to find solutions: wider treads, better suspension, lighter materials. But nothing could change the core truth. The Tiger was simply too big for the war Germany was fighting. While the Allies built vehicles that could cross bridges, drive long distances and be repaired anywhere, the Tiger required perfect conditions that no battlefield could provide. It wasn't just a tank. It was a logistical black hole. Each Tiger demanded more transport, more fuel, more maintenance, and more infrastructure than Germany could ever deliver. It was a machine designed for a war that no longer existed, a war of short, decisive battles. But World War II had become a war of attrition, movement, and supply. And in that kind of war, the Tiger was hopelessly outmatched. As the Allies bombed railways and fuel depots, the Tiger stood still, magnificent, silent, useless. They had the firepower to destroy anything in front of them, but they couldn't even reach the fight. The Tiger was a triumph of engineering trapped in a nightmare of logistics. It could win a duel, but it couldn't win a campaign. And as the war dragged on, that reality became impossible to ignore, because a weapon that can't move can't fight, and a tank that can't fight, no matter how powerful, is already defeated. The Tiger tank wasn't just hard to maintain, it was hard to build. Every single one was a masterpiece of precision engineering, hand-assembled with obsessive attention to detail. And that obsession became a trap. The Tiger's production demanded specialized tools, rare metals, and an army of highly trained workers. It wasn't something that could be built in an ordinary factory. Only 2 facilities in all of Germany, Henschel and Castle and Wegmann and Kumber were capable of producing them. Every bolt, every plate of armor, every gear in its complex transmission had to be machined to microscopic tolerances. Where the Allies built tanks like cars, Germany built them like watches. That difference was fatal. When Allied bombers began their relentless campaigns in 1943 and 1944, those watch factories became easy targets. A single bombing run could halt Tiger production for weeks. When Henschel's assembly line was hit, output fell by 70% overnight. There were no backup factories, no alternate production lines, no contingency plan. Germany had placed its faith and its future in complexity that could not survive disruption. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union was doing the exact opposite. They built T-34s anywhere with a roof, in tractor plants, railway depots, and converted warehouses. They simplified their design, reducing parts, using lower quality steel and standardizing everything. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. By the time Germany had completed 1,300 Tigers, the Soviets had rolled out more than 40,000 T-34s. The difference was industrial philosophy. The Germans believed in craftsmanship, the idea that quality would triumph over numbers. The Allies and Soviets believed in production, that victory belonged to whoever could replace losses fastest. In a war of attrition, the assembly line beat the blueprint every time. To make matters worse, the Tiger competed for resources with every other weapon Germany needed. The same factories that made Tiger transmissions could have built hundreds of truck engines or Panzer IV components. The same steel used for one Tiger's armor could have armored several lighter vehicles. But Hitler's fascination with superweapons, tanks, rockets, jet aircraft, ensured that precious materials went to prestige projects rather than practical ones. The Tiger wasn't just a tank. It was a symbol, and symbols are expensive. Inside Germany's war machine, the Tiger devoured everything: manpower, materials, and morale. It required its own supply network of spare parts, fuel, and tools. Field workshops couldn't service them. Only factories could, and those factories were being bombed into rubble. By late 1944, the numbers told the truth that propaganda tried to hide. While Germany struggled to produce 25 Tigers a month, the Allies were producing hundreds of Shermans, Churchills, and Cromwells. The Soviets were delivering thousands of T-34s every quarter. Even if a Tiger destroyed 10 enemy tanks, the math still didn't add up. And the more Germany tried to perfect its tanks, the fewer it could build. Each design upgrade, thicker armor, new turret, improved optics, slowed production even further. They were perfecting the machine while losing the war. When the bombs fell, assembly lines stopped. When power failed, tanks sat unfinished. And when the workers couldn't replace damaged equipment, Germany's armored future died before it reached the front lines. In the end, the Tiger's greatest weakness wasn't its armor or its engine. It was its method of creation. The Allies built tanks in factories. Germany built them in temples. And in the skies above those temples, Allied bombers ensured that the myth of German industrial invincibility would burn. One precision-engineered masterpiece at a time. The Tiger tank earned a terrifying reputation. Its 88mm gun could pierce any Allied armor long before the enemy was in range. Its frontal armor was nearly impenetrable. Crews who faced it called it the beast, the monster, or simply the Tiger. But like all legends, the truth was far less impressive than the myth. Early in the war, the Tiger's dominance was real. In North Africa and on the Eastern Front, it shocked Allied forces who were unprepared for such firepower. A single Tiger could destroy multiple enemy tanks before they even closed the distance. Its armor shrugged off most rounds like raindrops. But by 1943, that fear had faded, replaced by knowledge, strategy, and numbers. The Soviets adapted quickly. They didn't try to outgun the Tiger, they outsmarted it. Instead of aiming for the front, they targeted its treads and rear. A single shell to the tracks could immobilize it. And an immobilized Tiger was already dead. Its 57 tons made towing nearly impossible. Recovery under fire was suicide. Crews often had to abandon or scuttle their own tank to prevent capture. The Soviet doctrine became brutally efficient. Stop the Tiger, then kill it at leisure. Artillery, anti-tank rifles, and swarms of T-34s attacked in coordinated strikes. The Tiger's greatest strength, its armor, became useless once it couldn't move. Even the numbers tell the story of illusion. Soviet records claimed over 2,000 Tiger kills while Germany built only 1,354. How? Because many Tigers were knocked out, repaired, and destroyed again, counted multiple times in battle reports. It shows the Tiger wasn't invincible, just stubborn. And stubbornness is no substitute for reliability. On the Western Front, the same story repeated. American and British forces learned to avoid direct duels, instead calling in artillery, airstrikes, and flanking attacks. The Tiger's heavy armor meant little when a P-47 Thunderbolt or Typhoon dropped a bomb from above. Its slow speed and poor maneuverability made it an easy target on open roads. Propaganda, however, kept the myth alive. German newsreels showed Tigers crushing enemy tanks, claiming impossible kill ratios. Soldiers on every side whispered about a single Tiger, holding off dozens of enemies. And while some of those stories were true, they were exceptions, not the rule. Behind those victories was a darker truth. The Tiger battalions were always outnumbered, outgunned, and overstretched. Each tank required a dedicated maintenance crew, fuel trucks, and specialized ammunition. Every time one was lost, it couldn't be replaced easily, and every replacement meant another factory delay. Even the crews began to lose faith. They knew that while their tank could win a fight, the war around them was being lost. They could destroy 20 enemy tanks, but it didn't matter when the enemy built 40 more the next week. The Tiger was never meant to be invincible. It was meant to be intimidating. And intimidation doesn't win wars. The myth endured because it looked unbeatable. Towering armor, thunderous cannon, and the psychological shock it created gave it an aura of supremacy. But in war, fear fades and facts remain. The Tiger's record, in about 8,000 confirmed kills across 2,300 tanks, sounds impressive until you realize the Allies built nearly 100,000 tanks in response. Germany needed a 20-to-1 kill ratio just to break even. It achieved 6. The Tiger wasn't a weapon of victory. It was a monument to arrogance, an engineering marvel that mistook terror for triumph. By the time its legend spread across Europe, the Tiger was already dying, not at the hands of its enemies, but under the weight of its own myth. The Tiger tank wasn't only a machine of war. It was a machine that consumed men. Every single one represented not just steel and fuel, but thousands of hours of human labor. While it rumbled across the battlefield, unseen hands had paid the price long before it ever fired a shot. Each Tiger took 300,000 man-hours to build, the work of engineers, machinists, welders, and mechanics. But by 1943, Germany's skilled workforce was disappearing. Millions of men were dead or drafted into the army, leaving the factories desperate for replacements. The Nazi regime filled that gap with forced labor, prisoners of war, civilians from occupied territories, and concentration camp inmates. Inside the industrial complexes of Kassel and Nibelungenwerke, these workers toiled under brutal conditions. They worked 12-hour shifts surrounded by heat, noise, and dust with little food and constant surveillance. Mistakes were punished harshly. A Tiger's perfection demanded precision, and precision demanded suffering. The irony was tragic. The most advanced tank in the world was built, in part, by the most broken people in Europe. For every Tiger that rolled out of the factory, dozens of lives were destroyed behind the scenes. This wasn't just a cost in numbers, it was a cost in humanity. And as Germany's situation worsened, that cost only grew. Even the soldiers who manned the Tiger paid their share. A Tiger crew consisted of 5 men: commander, gunner, loader, driver, and radio operator. They were the elite of the Panzer Corps, hand-picked and trained to handle this mechanical monster, but their pride came with risk. A single breakdown behind enemy lines meant death or capture, and once immobilized, the Tiger became a coffin. The tank's design made quick escape nearly impossible. If it caught fire, the heavy hatches jammed under heat and pressure. Crews burned alive inside machines once hailed as invincible. The same armor that protected them in battle became their tomb in defeat. Survivors recalled the horror vividly: the roar of the Maybach engine, the clang of shells, the stench of fuel, and the constant fear of breakdown. Even when the Tiger worked perfectly, it demanded constant maintenance. Tracks wore out, engines overheated, and transmissions failed without warning. Crews spent more time repairing than fighting. They were mechanics first, soldiers second. Behind the lines, logistics officers struggled to keep the Tigers running. Each tank required 5 times the spare parts, tools, and fuel of a Panzer IV. Transporting a single Tiger to the front was a logistical nightmare. It consumed so much fuel that moving it sometimes cost more than building it, and yet Germany refused to stop. Hitler's personal obsession with the Tiger ensured that production continued long after it made strategic sense. Factories were rebuilt after bombings just to resume production of a tank that could no longer turn the tide. Men died rebuilding what should have been abandoned. By 1945, the human cost had reached absurd levels. Tens of thousands of workers and soldiers had labored, suffered, or died to create fewer than 1/400 Tigers. And most of those were lost not to enemy fire, but to mechanical failure, fuel shortages, or abandonment. The Tiger was supposed to embody German might. Instead, it revealed German desperation. It showed how far the Reich would go, sacrificing its people, its resources, and its sanity in pursuit of perfection that war no longer allowed. The Allies built tanks for war. Germany built the Tiger for pride, and in doing so, it proved that pride can cost more lives than any weapon ever could. By 1945, the Tiger's roar had fallen silent. What began as a symbol of German engineering supremacy had become the echo of a dying empire. The tank that once terrified Allied soldiers was now stranded, abandoned, or destroyed, not by superior firepower, but by the cold arithmetic of war. The Tiger's story ends not in glory, but in exhaustion. Every mile it moved drained Germany's collapsing supply lines. Every Tiger built consumed the materials of 3 Panzer IVs or 10 assault guns. Every victory it achieved cost more than Germany could ever afford to replace. Strategically, the Tiger had failed before it even began. It was designed for a war Germany could no longer fight, a war of mobility, mass production, and logistics. The Tiger belonged to an older vision of warfare, one obsessed with superiority rather than sustainability. While Germany built steel masterpieces, the Allies built numbers. The Americans and Soviets understood something the Germans refused to accept. Quantity is its own form of quality. For every Tiger, there were 20 Shermans or T-34s. Each one weaker, yes, but together, unstoppable. As the Allies advanced, the battlefield became a numbers game Germany couldn't win. Entire Tiger battalions were lost not to combat, but to fuel shortages and mechanical failures. Crews were forced to destroy their own tanks to prevent capture. They'd light charges under the engine blocks, watching their steel giants burn before retreating on foot. By the war's end, nearly 57% of all Tigers were lost to breakdowns or abandonment. Those that remained were scattered, isolated, and powerless to change the outcome. A weapon meant to dominate became a burden that crippled its own army. Even the German high command began to realize the truth. Generals who once praised the Tiger now questioned its very existence. One officer wrote bitterly, "We win battles and lose wars. We destroy 20 enemy tanks and lose 1 Tiger, but they build 40 more." It was the perfect summary of Germany's fatal error, winning tactically, losing strategically. When the Allies captured Tiger factories in 1945, they found machines still half-finished, parts scattered and workers too weak to continue. The once proud production lines were ruins of wasted genius. Blueprints for the next evolution, the Tiger II, even larger and more complex, lay abandoned, proof that Germany had learned nothing from its mistakes. Meanwhile, Soviet factories were still churning out T-34s by the thousands. Even as their tanks rolled into Berlin, the war's outcome wasn't decided by who had the better machine, but by who had enough of them. And when the final Tiger was destroyed, it didn't just mark the end of a tank. It marked the end of an idea, the belief that technology alone could win a modern war. The Tiger's 88mm gun, its thick armor, its terrifying presence, all of it meant nothing against the relentless tide of mass production, logistics, and fuel. It was a beautiful weapon in an ugly war, a masterpiece that didn't belong to the world it fought in. In the end, the Tiger tank was not a symbol of strength. It was a symbol of Germany's delusion, a monument to perfection built in a war that demanded practicality. It stood as proof that wars are not won by the best machines but by the best systems. Germany built Tigers. The Allies built factories, fuel depots, and supply chains. And in that difference lay the outcome of the war. The Tiger tank, majestic, terrifying, unforgettable, was Germany's greatest triumph in engineering, and its greatest failure in strategy. When the war ended, the battlefield was littered with the wrecks of once mighty tigers, hulking shells of steel, silent reminders of Germany's misplaced genius. The world had seen the most advanced tank of its time, but also the proof that brilliance without balance leads only to ruin. For decades, the Tiger lived on, not as a weapon, but as a myth. Allied soldiers who faced it never forgot the sight of that massive turret turning, the earth trembling under its weight, or the sound of its 88mm gun firing like thunder. Hollywood turned it into a legend, and historians called it the king of the battlefield. But behind the legend was the truth, a machine that killed Germany's chances. Long before it ever killed an enemy, only a handful of Tigers survive today, restored in museums like the Bovington Tank Museum in England and the Deutsches Panzer Museum in Germany. Each one tells two stories, one of awe and one of warning. They stand as symbols of what happens when nations prioritize perfection over practicality, when fear and pride outweigh reason and strategy. Modern armies learned that lesson well. Today's tanks, aircraft, and war machines are built not just for power, but for sustainability, efficiency, and mass production. The Tiger taught the world that no weapon, however advanced, can win without the system that supports it. For Germany, the Tiger remains both a triumph and a tragedy. It showcased the heights of engineering brilliance and the depths of strategic failure. It was a weapon that could dominate the battlefield but not the war. In the end, the Tiger was more than a tank. It was a reflection of its creators, bold, ambitious, and blinded by their own confidence. It roared across Europe for a few brief years, leaving behind not victory, but a legacy carved in iron and irony. The Tiger tank didn't just represent Germany's might, it represented its mistake. And in that mistake lies one of history's greatest lessons. Wars are not won by the most powerful machines, but by the smartest decisions.